Did you know that the one you curse every single day was once the closest of all creatures to the light of the throne? And that his army, which besieges you now, is directed by the commands of his 5 sons, who dwell in the very details of your life without you even realizing it. How could a worshiper, whose prostrations left no inch of the heavens unperfumed, transform into a spiteful, malice-driven being leading you toward hell? Hello, and welcome to my small world. I am Dodi, and from the bottom of my heart, welcome to the Dodi Drama family. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and let us take our very together into this enchanting world. The complete story of the fall of Azazel and the dawn of human conflict. Somewhere between the heavens and the earth, in a deeply ancient time known only to God, there unfolded a story that has never been told in its full detail. A devout, obedient worshiper attained a status that no created being before him had ever reached. He stood with pride in the ranks of the angels, glorifying as they glorified and praying as they prayed, until he was raised from the dust of the earth and its miseries to the highest realms of heaven. This extraordinary worshiper, who gained vast dominion and became one of the keepers of paradise, was named Azazel. Azazel stood at the loftiest peak a creature could ever reach, close to paradise and close to the light of the Creator. Yet in a single moment that altered the entire course of existence, a resounding fall occurred. He transformed from the greatest of creatures in worship and asceticism into the most disbelieving and rebellious of them all, from the closest in proximity to God to the furthest cast into the abyss of damnation. He transformed from Azazel, the close and devoted worshiper, into Iblis, Satan the accursed. Everyone knows this brief, summarized part of the story. God commanded the prostration to Adam. Iblis refused and grew arrogant, and so he was expelled from paradise forever. But did you know that what you know is nothing more than a tiny fraction of the truth? The organizational structure of the kingdom of Iblis. In this documentary, we will tell you the complete story. Let us begin from the moment of Adam's creation. In fact, we will go back in time to before the very beginning. To the world of the earth's first inhabitants, the Jinn, the Hinn, and the Binn. We will reveal to you the organizational structure of Iblis's army, and we will learn about his 5 sons who manage his kingdom. Thaber, Alawar, Dasim, Zalanbor, Mabsud. We will reveal to you how each and every one of these 5 has a specific, dangerous mission in your daily life while you remain completely unaware. We will learn how Iblis's weapons work against you. Weapons like whispering, false adornment, which alters the appearance of sin in your eyes so it looks like righteousness, procrastination, and casting doubt, leading all the way to his most dangerous weapon, despair, which completely prevents you from returning to God. We won't stop there. We will open the files of the secret gateways through which he infiltrates your heart, such as anger, lust, and envy. We will place you face to face with your Kareen, your personal companion demon who accompanies you like your shadow, who knows you better than you know yourself, studies your weaknesses, and knows exactly when you are strong, so he retreats, and when you are weak, so he strikes. Why must you hear this story in all its terrifying details? Because your primary enemy, who swore by the majesty of God to mislead you, never sleeps. You will never be able to protect yourself from him unless you know him truly. How can you fight an enemy whose battle plan you do not know? How can you defend yourself when you are ignorant of his weapons? And how can you protect your home and family when you do not know that a demon like Dasim's sole mission is to ignite problems and the fire of disputes within the walls of your house? Let us begin from the true beginning, from the time before Adam, in the depths of an ancient era, long before a single human foot ever touched the surface of the earth. Chapter 1. the forgotten Earth and the conflict of the Hinn and the Binn. This planet was a desolate world, boiling with chaos under a sky that never knew tranquility. In those dark ages, the Earth was not a peaceful paradise. Rather, it was a terrifying theater covered by giant forests whose branches intertwined to suffocate the light, and towering mountains that continuously spewed their lava into an atmosphere poisoned with ash. Here, in this raging hell, settled the creatures of the Hinn and the Binn, the beings who were the first to violate the clay of the earth and tamper with the destiny of existence. The creatures of the Binn moved through the valleys like massive, deformed masses of flesh and rock, their eyes gleaming with an impending evil, and their heavy bodies leaving deep scars on the face of the earth with every step. These creatures had no language other than a roar that tore through the silence, and no craft other than absolute destruction. Alongside them lived the creatures of the Hinn, who were more cunning and lethal, gelatinous creatures with a fiery nature that pierced through the fog, exhaling their poisons into the air to kill everything that was alive. The relationship between them was nothing but an endless cycle of horrifying, ceaseless massacres. The Hinn enslaved the Binn through sheer force, and the Binn rebelled against the Hinn with brutal violence. The result was that the earth was slaughtered 1,000 times a day. On nights when all hope vanished, hundreds of thousands of these creatures clashed in open battlefields. The sound of crushing bones filled the horizon, and the stench of death wafted from rivers that turned from clear waters into a deadly black due to the seas of blood unjustly spilled into them. These creatures left no tree unburned, nor any pure spot unsullied by their corruption. Evil penetrated the very marrow of the earth to such an extent that the seas began to cast charred corpses onto the shores, as nature itself refused to embrace their cursed remains in its depths. There was no room for pity, and the concept of mercy or justice did not exist in the law of the Hinn and the Binn. The strong devoured the flesh of the weak alive, and the weak lay in wait for the strong to slaughter them in a moment of heedlessness. This bloody absurdity continued for thousands of years until the dry land groaned under the weight of their sins, and the vapors of injustice rose to block the skies and reach the highest dominion. The mountains trembled from the sheer volume of atrocities committed atop their peaks, and the valleys filled with cries of terror that found no savior. The planet had turned into a vast arena of endless blood and corruption, and the earth began to wail and cry out, begging for deliverance from these inhabitants who knew nothing but destruction. Chapter 2: The Chosen Leader Among the Angels. While the earth was drowning in the blood of the Hinn and the Binn, groaning under the weight of their corruption, the high heavens lived in absolute purity and a flawless divine order. In those radiant realms, there was a being from among the Jinn who caught the attention of the inhabitants of heaven, not through physical strength, but through his asceticism and his complete detachment from the conflicts of his own kind. This being was Iblis, who chose to leave the noise and darkness of the earth to ascend the ranks of worship until his name echoed through the highest dominion as the model of the devout, submissive Jinni. Iblis spent thousands of years in the sanctuary of devotion, moving between prostration and standing with a diligence and effort unmatched by any Jinn before him. He glorified God across the horizons of the universe, immersing himself in the praises of the Creator with a heart that appeared to everyone to be entirely sincere. Because of this uniqueness and obedience, Iblis attained an honor that no Jinni had ever received. The command was issued to raise his status from the dust of the forgotten earth to the 7 heavens, finding himself living and thriving among the ranks of the noble angels. He moved among them, witnessing the secrets of existence and hearing the revelation of heaven until the angels themselves thought he was one of them. In fact, he came to be known as the worshipper of the people of heaven. Yet, behind this thick veil of reverence and piety, a hidden seed of the ego was growing in silence. Iblis looked at himself in the spiritual mirror and saw a being who, through through his own personal effort, managed to transcend his fiery nature to reach this lofty status. He watched the angels executing commands without independent free will, while he saw in himself a hero who chose obedience out of his own free will. This gave rise to a deep-seated feeling of superiority and distinction within him. The garment of worship grew more brilliant, but beneath it, it concealed a sweeping ambition for sovereignty and prominence. When the grievances of the Hinn and the Binn reached their peak, and the decisive divine decree was issued to cleanse the planet from the filth of the corruptors, the moment came that Iblis had long awaited, to step out of the silence of the sanctuary and into the roar of action. The choice fell upon him to be part of the heavenly army descending to earth. Moreover, he was given command over a legion of believing Jinn to be the striking arm alongside the angels. For Iblis, this selection was the ultimate validation of his power and worthiness. He saw himself as the chosen leader who would carry the sword of heaven to cut off the roots of the corruptors. Iblis donned his battle armor, cloaked himself in the fiery power from which he was created, and stood at the forefront of the radiant army. His eyes gleamed with a brightness that was not merely a desire for purity, but a longing for the day he would tread the earth as a great conqueror from whom all existence would tremble. Thus, the chosen worshipper began his journey toward the great battle, writing with his flame the first line in the epic saga of cleansing. Chapter 3: The Great Epic of Cleansing. The gates of heaven split open to reveal a sight that made bodies shudder. The army of light and fire poured down like burning meteors, tearing through the curtain of darkness surrounding planet Earth. At the forefront, Iblis rushed forward with a raging, fiery body, leading a legion of believing Jinn who rallied under the banner of the angels. The earth shook violently under the impact of the descending forces, and the atmosphere surrounding the planet began to glow with the pressure of heavenly energy, turning the pitch-black night of the earth into a blood-red day filled with terror and anticipation. The moment the earth had long awaited had finally arrived to begin the epic that would wipe out every trace of the corruptors from the face of the world. When the heavenly army touched the dry land, Iblis and his soldiers clashed with the creatures of the Hinn and the Binn in a horrifying confrontation at the edges of the ancient continents. The very first moment of impact was enough to rip apart the cloak of silence. The angels let out cries that shook the foundations of the mountains, and targeted thunderbolts rained down from the high clouds to burn the fortresses of the corruptors and destroy their first lines of defense. Here, Iblis's military genius and a ferocity never witnessed before became manifest. He moved like lightning through the enemy ranks, striking with his fiery blaze to turn the massive bodies of the Binn into ash scattered by the wind, and chasing the phantom-like forms of the Hinn high into the air to tear them to pieces with fists of unquenchable fire. In this battle, Iblis employed military tactics of extreme cunning and cruelty. He deliberately divided his army to strike the power centers of both the Hinn and the Binn simultaneously, preventing them from gathering or repositioning. Iblis personally led a pincer movement against the valleys where the tyrants of the Binn had fortified themselves. He burned the entrances of their caves, suffocating them with fiery smoke, while his soldiers pursued the gelatinous Hinn creatures through the fog, hunting them down with bolts of light that exposed their concealment. The earth beneath the feet of the warriors was nothing but a boiling hell. Rocks melted and valleys flowed with lava and blood, while Iblis stormed the impenetrable fortresses. And every blow he dealt was a personal revenge against this corruption that had defiled his future dominion. As the heat of the battle intensified, the creatures of the Hinn and the Binn realized they were no match for this heavenly hurricane. Defeat began to ripple through their ranks, and their resistance turned into a humiliating mass retreat. Here, Iblis executed the tactic of total cleansing. he ordered the pursuit of the fleeing remnants, banning them from settling in any inhabited part of the land. He chased them with his flames into dense forests and besieged them on the peaks of towering mountains, until the survivors found no sanctuary except to flee toward the furthest, most desolate edges of the planet. The creatures of the Binn rushed in a suicidal migration toward the seas and oceans to settle at the bottom of dark waters, far from the fires of Iblis, while the creatures of the Hinn fled toward deep caves and abandoned islands shrouded in perpetual fog. This epic battle lasted for days and nights of raging, relentless combat, until the dry land was completely cleared of any trace of the corruptors. At the end of the battle, Iblis stood on the shore of the great ocean, watching the remnants of the Hinn and the Binn dive into the deep or vanish behind distant islands in eternal exile. The noise that had lasted for centuries finally fell silent, and a solemn stillness descended upon the planet washed by the fires of heaven. Under the command of the victorious leader, the earth was now pure, white, and empty, waiting for its next inhabitants, while Iblis looked toward the horizon with eyes full of the vanity of victory, believing that with his own hands he had reshaped existence and become the sole master of this purified world. Chapter 4: The Euphoria of Victory and the Dawn of Arrogance. After the war laid down its burdens and the wailing of the Hinn, and the Binn fell silent under the blows of the heavenly army, a solemn quietude settled over the earth, a quiet it had not known for thousands of years. Iblis stood in the heart of this silence, amidst the smoke rising from the remnants of the burned fortresses, gazing upon the planet his fires had cleansed. His gaze was not that of a soldier who had completed a sacred mission and was returning to his barracks. Rather, it was the gaze of a conqueror sweeping the boundaries of his new kingdom with his eyes. He inhaled the air mingled with the scent of ash and victory, feeling for the first time a power coursing through his fiery veins that he had never felt, even at the peak of his worship in heaven. Iblis roamed the regions of the earth, contemplating the valleys that had become empty and the mountains that had submitted to his power. In those moments, the seed of arrogance that had grown in secret began to bear bitter fruit in the depths of his soul. He began to whisper to himself as he saw the traces of destruction he had inflicted upon the enemies. Who else but me could have done this? The angels are merely commanded soldiers, but it was I who drew the plans, I who stormed the fortresses, and I who cleansed this world with my flame. He began to see the silence of the earth as personal submission to him, and the departure of the Hinn and the Binn as an acknowledgement of his invincible might. The euphoria of victory in his chest transformed into a feeling of absolute supremacy over everything in existence. He began to compare himself to the angels, seeing them as creatures programmed for obedience without independent will. While seeing himself as a being who combined the purity of worship, the cunning of war, and the power of will, Iblis believed he was the most perfect being in existence. He was a Jinni who ascended through his knowledge, a warrior who triumphed through his intellect, and a leader to whom the earth bowed after long periods of corruption. The idea of superiority dominated every cell of his being, and he began to solidify the belief in his mind that the fire from which he was created was the core of power and sovereignty, and that every other matter was inferior to it in rank and status. Iblis sat atop the highest mountain peak on the face of the earth, looking out at the distant horizon like an uncrowned king. He no longer saw heaven as his only place. Rather, he came to see the earth as his personal inheritance, which he deserved to possess by the edge of the sword. Arrogance had blinded him to the fact that victory was achieved through divine enablement, so he began to attribute the credit to his own self-derived power and military cunning. At these critical moments, Iblis thought he had reached the pinnacle of glory, completely unaware that this pride was the poison that had begun to seep into his soul. He did not know that his feeling of being the best and the strongest was the very ladder that would cast him down from the highest heavens to the depths of damnation. He was drunk on the euphoria of conquest, turning a deaf ear to the call of humility, waiting for the honoring he saw as an earned right, while destiny was preparing a trial for him that would expose the falsehood of this vanity before a material he had never factored into his accounts: clay. Chapter 5: The Announcement of the Rival, Adam. While Iblis was drowning in the intoxication of his own greatness, enjoying his title as the undisputed hero of earth and heaven, the momentous divine proclamation was issued, one that shook his entire being and uprooted his pride from its very foundations. The command was not about a new cleansing campaign or an elevation of his status. Rather, it was an announcement to the highest assembly of the creation of a completely different being, a being who would be called Adam. The news fell upon Iblis's ears like a thunderclap on a pitch-black night, but the true shock lay not in the creation itself, but in the function assigned to this creature. The Creator, glorified be He, announced that Adam would be a vicegerent, Khalifa, upon the earth. The fiery blood froze in Iblis's veins upon hearing the word, vicegerent. That very earth, which he had watered with his sweat, cleansed with his fire, and from which he had uprooted the Hinn and the Binn through his cunning and power, was now being handed on a silver platter to a creature that had never even existed before. Iblis began to observe the process of creation with a bewilderment mixed with hidden malice. He saw the angels gathering handfuls of earth from its plains and mountains, from its red clay and its black soil, and then this dust was kneaded with water to become a dormant, sounding clay. He looked at this clay with indescribable contempt, comparing it to the glowing, penetrating fire from which he was created, asking himself with bitterness, "How can this cold clay take my place in ruling the planet that I conquered with my blaze?" Iblis circled around the cast body of Adam while it was still clay, before the soul was breathed into it. He would enter through his mouth and exit through his rear, feeling his cavities and striking him with his hand, causing the body to emit a hollow sound like pottery. He would whisper to himself with a poisoned vanity, "For what were you created? You are a weak, hollow being, possessing neither light nor fire." Yet, anxiety was gnawing at his heart. The divine honoring of Adam was clear, and the attention to the details of his creation far exceeded anything Iblis had ever witnessed. The arrogance he had built over thousands of years began to turn into a spark of jealousy that burned his chest. He came to see Adam as an illegitimate rival who had come to rob him of his historical inheritance of sovereignty over the earth. The shock had transformed in the depths of Iblis into a silent rebellion. He could not comprehend the divine wisdom in making this weak creature a vicegerent, and he began to question Adam's worthiness before his life had even begun. He believed that the right to vicegerency belonged to the one who fought, endured, and worshipped, not to one created from a handful of dust. In those critical moments, while the highest assembly awaited the breathing of the soul into Adam, Iblis harbored a dark intention within himself. He was preparing the ground to prove that this new rival was nothing but an illusion unworthy of honor. The gates of conflict had swung wide open, and the chosen worshiper had transformed into a spiteful stalker, waiting for the exact moment he would be asked to recognize this rival, so he could release the cry of defiance that would alter the course of existence forever. Chapter 6: The Moment of Fracture and Fall. Heaven held its breath at that solemn, unprecedented moment in the history of existence. The body of Adam was complete, and the clay was prepared to receive the greatest divine secret. Suddenly, God breathed into that still body from his spirit. Life surged through the veins, limbs stirred, and Adam opened his eyes to look upon the kingdom of God for the very first time. In the midst of this majesty, the definitive cosmic command was issued, shaking Iblis's entire being and making his limbs tremble. Prostrate to Adam. It was not a mere request. It was the ultimate test of everything the inhabitants of heaven claimed of loyalty, love, and submission. In the blink of an eye, and without a moment's hesitation, the angels prostrated, all of them together. Those great, radiant beings bowed down in glorification of God's command and in honor of this creature whom the Creator had chosen to be his vicegerent. All movement ceased throughout paradise, and only one remained standing in that awe-inspiring scene. Iblis stood alone, rigid as a feverish pillar, refusing to bow the head he had so long raised in worship. His eyes burned with the scorching fire of pride as he looked upon the prostrating angels around him with contempt, and upon Adam with a superiority that defied description. His silence at that moment was louder than any scream, a silence broken by the majesty of the divine call. What prevented you from prostrating when I commanded you? Here, the volcano that Iblis had suppressed in his chest for eons erupted. He did not bow down in apology, nor did he seek forgiveness for a moment of weakness. Instead, he uttered words that were the first nail in the coffin of his status, marking the very first intellectual sin in the history of creation. I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. Iblis placed his diseased mind on one scale and the command of God on the other, judging by a logic entirely based on matter. He saw the glowing, penetrating fire as the source of all sovereignty and the cold, heavy clay as worthy of nothing but contempt. This public refusal exposed the truth. All those thousands of years of prostration were not out of love for the one worshipped, but were merely a polishing of the mirror of the self. In that fleeting moment, everything Iblis had built over thousands of years shattered. The garment of reverence was stripped from him, and the aura of the worshipper of the people of heaven fell away, transforming him from a station of proximity and honor to a station of damnation and expulsion. The irreversible divine judgment was passed. Get out of it, for you are outcast regime. In a single second, the victorious leader and ascetic worshiper transformed into an accursed devil, expelled from all mercy and banished from all purity. He no longer had a place among the radiant beings. Instead, he became an entity contaminated by pride, carrying the ugliness of sin in his soul. Iblis left paradise with a heart boiling with pitch-black malice, glaring at Adam as an eternal enemy, turning the moment of his fracture and fall into the dawn of a cosmic war that would not end until the conclusion of time. He fell from the heights of heaven by the power of I, realizing too late that pride is an abyss with no bottom. Chapter 7. The Divine Reprieve. You are of those reprieved. After the final decree of expulsion was issued, and at the exact moment Iblis realized he had lost everything, his status in heaven, his companionship with the angels, and his future as the king of the earth, he did not fall crushed by regret, nor did he bend to beg for forgiveness. On the contrary, his fracture transformed into a kind of poisoned tyranny, and he gathered all his cunning to conduct a dialogue that stands as the strangest and most dangerous in the history of existence. The accursed stood in the presence of divine majesty, not to ask for pardon, but to demand the weapon with which he would reshape his upcoming battle. Iblis spoke his request, revealing a long-term diabolical plan. My lord, then reprieve me until the day they are resurrected. He was not asking to remain alive out of a love for life or a fear of non-existence. He wanted time. He coveted a lifespan that would stretch across the entire span of humanity, allowing him to be a witness to every single soul that emerged from the lineage of Adam. He sought enough opportunity to prove to the Creator that this clay creature, who had been preferred over him, was nothing but a weak, ungrateful, and fickle being. Iblis wanted to turn his survival into an endless testing ground, dragging the children of Adam down into his dark abyss. The divine response came as the shock that threw the gates of historical conflict wide open. Then indeed, you are of those reprieved until the day of the time well known. This response was not an honoring of him. Rather, it was a drawing in and the fulfillment of the trial through which humans must pass. In that moment, Iblis became a being outside the boundaries of conventional death, a being possessing enough time to weave his nets and enough experience to study the weaknesses of every human before they were even born. He was granted the reprieve, but it was a poisoned respite that ends on a well-known day, where neither time nor survival will avail. Iblis emerged from this dialogue carrying the document of reprieve as if it were a temporary deed of victory. His features changed completely. The touch of worship vanished, replaced by the darkness of the curse, and his eyes ignited with the glow of pure revenge. He saw in this divine promise a golden opportunity to prove his alleged worthiness. Since he was expelled because of Adam, he would make Adam and his progeny the fuel for the fire of his battle. Iblis now possessed time, and the beats of his fiery heart began to thud, announcing the dawn of the era of the Stalker, one who would never rest until he saw the throne of Adam on earth shaking under the weight of temptation. Thus began the journey of the reprieved one, who dedicated his long life to a single goal, turning the journey of mankind into a path of endless stumbling blocks. Chapter 8: The Oath of Great Revenge. The moment Iblis secured the deed of reprieve and guaranteed his survival until the day of the well-known time, the last remnants of his worshippers' dignity evaporated, revealing his true nature as an open enemy who knows no compromise. He did not leave the arena of heaven with a broken wing. Rather, he left it releasing a cry of defiance that shook the very foundations of existence. At that turning point, Iblis stood to officially declare his comprehensive war, a war that does not recognize swords and blood, but targets hearts and souls. Iblis placed his wounded pride on one scale and the destiny of all humanity on the other. With all the spite and malice he possessed, he uttered the oath of great revenge, the oath that made hearts tremble. By your might, I will surely mislead them all. It was no passing oath. It was the proclamation of the constitution of his upcoming kingdom. Iblis invoked the very might of God to swear an oath to misguide his creation, displaying an ingratitude that surpassed all imagination. Then he began to sketch his military strategy to ensnare the children of Adam, describing the method of psychological siege he would lay around every human being. Then I will come to them from before them and from behind them and on their right and on their left. This oath meant total encirclement. He would come to them from before them to distract them with their worldly life and beautify false hopes for them. From behind them to remind them of their sins and make them despair of the mercy of their Creator. On their right to infiltrate them through the gates of religion using hypocrisy, vanity, and innovation. On their left to drag them into the swamps of desires and abominations. Thus, the lines of the ultimate cosmic battle were drawn, transforming the once most devoted worshipper into the ultimate architect of human temptation. The Great War, from heaven to earth. Iblis, Satan, desired to turn human life into a perpetual arena of conflict, where his whispers would never cease and his cunning would never tire. He aimed for a single objective, which he declared with utter insolence, and you will not find most of them grateful. He wanted to prove that this creature, before whom he was commanded to prostrate, is an ungrateful, weak being, quick to fall into the very first trap set for him. Iblis left the holy realms carrying this dark oath like a banner for his upcoming war. He no longer saw beauty or purity in existence. Instead, he began to view every human yet to be born as an enemy to be destroyed and a prey to be hunted. The once victorious leader transformed into an engineer of seduction, studying the traits of the human soul, searching for loopholes of weakness, and preparing armies of illusions and fantasies. The devil declared that his war would not end until the end of time, and that his ultimate goal was to empty the earth of the architecture of truth and to fill hell with the progeny of that clay, which caused his expulsion. Thus began the phase of the great anticipation. Iblis began watching the paradise inhabited by Adam, waiting for the moment when he would turn his oath into a tangible reality. Chapter 9: Infiltrating the Paradise of Abode. While Adam and Eve were enjoying the paradise of abode, where there was neither hunger nor thirst, nor a burning sun, nor a biting cold, the walls of this paradise stood like an impenetrable fortress of pure light, guarded by stern and severe angels who do not disobey Allah in what He commands them. Inside, everything spoke of purity and peace, rivers of milk and honey, trees with low-hanging fruits, and air carrying the scent of pure musk. Outside, Iblis stood in the darkness of his banishment, watching this bliss with eyes burning with a fire of malice and jealousy. He swore revenge, but the first obstacle seemed impossible. How could an accursed, outcast being, reeking of pride and disobedience, step onto a land that none enter except the pure? Iblis realized through his long experience that the fiery power with which he had once crushed the armies of the Hinn and the Binn would be of no use to him here. The walls of paradise could not be breached by lightning, and its guardians could not be defeated by armies. He knew that any attempt to approach in his exposed, demonic form would mean burning by the light of the angelic guard before he could even touch the thresholds of the gates. Here, it was necessary to summon every shred of cunning he had acquired over thousands of years, and to shift the battlefield from direct confrontation to a war of stealth and deception. He had to temporarily cast off the cloak of pride for which he was expelled, to put on the garment of trickery and humiliation. Iblis began to roam around the walls of paradise, studying its movements and observing the creatures allowed to enter and exit. He was looking for a loophole, a tool, or any form in which he could hide his dark reality. Because he possessed the Jinn's abilities to shapeshift and conceal himself, he decided to compress his accursed fiery essence and completely erase his demonic aura. Turning himself into a mere hidden whisper or a barely visible specter. Ancient legends tell that he sought the help of some beasts that used to enter paradise, hiding inside them or taking their form. But the more terrifying truth lay in his capacity for spiritual shrinkage. He contorted himself into a dormant negative energy that passed through safely, as if it were just a passing breeze of air that did not arouse the attention of the luminous guardians. Iblis held his breath and slipped through the gates of light in a fleeting moment of negligence. The moment he crossed the threshold of paradise was a historic one. How could the accursed tread upon the land of purity? Paradise did not reject him immediately, because he did not manifest as a corrupting entity yet. Rather, he entered as an abstract idea, a faint shadow crawling silently among the trees of chrysolite and ruby. As soon as he bypassed the guards, he found himself facing the absolute beauty of which he had been deprived, a beauty that only fueled the rage burning in his chest. But he suppressed his anger and began to crawl very slowly, searching for his prize, Adam and Eve. Iblis did not rush to attack. He walked through paradise in disguise, watching the couple from afar. He studied their nature and noticed the serenity of their hearts and their innocence, which had not been tainted by prior experiences of deception. He saw how they obeyed divine commands with love, and how they stayed away from the forbidden tree they were forbidden to approach. And right there, The grand demonic idea flashed in his mind. He had found the weapon with which he would destroy this bliss. He would not attack Adam and Eve, nor would he push them by force. Instead, he would use that tree as a golden bait in the heart of the paradise of abode. Chapter 10: The Whispering of the Tree and Eternity. Where the branches sparkled and danced under a divine, never-fading light, the forbidden tree stood as a silent test in the midst of this absolute bliss. Adam and Eve would pass by it, lowering their gaze in adherence to the clear divine command not to approach it. In those hidden corners, Iblis lay in disguise, watching this scene with eyes expert in dissecting souls. The accursed realized that calling Adam to direct disobedience or flagrant rebellion would end in miserable failure, for those hearts were still pure white, untainted by the germ of pride that had brought his own downfall. Therefore, he decided to change the rules of the game entirely. He abandoned the weapon of direct assault to begin using the most dangerous weapon of mass spiritual destruction, psychological seduction, and playing on the chords of latent instincts. Iblis did not appear in the form of a predatory beast or an exposed enemy. Rather, with demonic brilliance, he personified the role of a loyal advisor and a compassionate lover. He began to send his whispers like a subtle breeze stealing into their minds, not as crude orders, but as questions that arouse curiosity and awaken desires. He whispered in a warm voice bearing the character of fake care, questioning with artificial innocence about the great secret that this tree hid. He cast his first seed when he said to them in the depths of their thoughts, "Your Lord did not forbid you this tree except that you should become angels or become of the immortal." He completely reversed the reality. Instead of the tree being a symbol of testing and obedience, he portrayed it in their minds as a magical portal hiding a stolen perfection. Iblis continued to spin his spider webs around their minds, targeting the two deepest instincts that could dwell in any living being: the instinct for eternal survival and the soul's longing for perfection and elevation. He delivered his fatal psychological blow when he revealed to them the illusion of the divine secret, saying with malicious confidence, "Shall I guide you to the tree of eternity and a kingdom that does not decay? If you eat from it, you will not be humans of clay. Rather, you will turn into angels of light, or you will be among the immortal ones regularized in this bliss, untouched by death, demise, or expulsion." Iblis played on the chord of fear of losing paradise, portraying to them that their current obedience was a state of deficiency and that total perfection lay entirely in tasting that forbidden fruit. Despite the brilliance of these illusions, the pure innate nature, Phytra, of Adam and Eve resisted this whispering. The divine command resonated within them clearly and decisively. Here, Iblis realized that whispering alone would not suffice to break the fortress of obedience, so he decided to use the vilest trick in the history of deception, a trick that no sound mind had ever imagined before. He stood before them, and for the first time in existence, he used the name of the Supreme Creator in an outright lie, swearing to them by the heaviest oaths, and he swore to them both, "Indeed, I am to you of the sincere advisors." He swore by Allah the Almighty that he desired nothing for them but good, elevation, and eternity. These false oaths fell like lightning on Adam's mind, in his pure, sound nature and his pristine perception. It was utterly impossible and inconceivable that any creature in existence would dare to swear by Allah falsely. This oath was the loophole through which all defenses of the first human soul collapsed. Adam and Eve did not eat from the tree out of rebellion against Allah. Rather, they fell victim to a complex psychological trick and a betrayal that exploited their glorification of the Creator's name. Under the weight of this poisoned temptation, continuous psychological pressure, and the fake promise of eternity and angelhood, trembling hands reached out toward the forbidden branches. It was a scene that Iblis watched with a malicious smile that widened with every millimeter their hands drew closer to the fruit, announcing the success of the first brainwashing operation in the history of the universe, and ushering in the end of the era of eternal innocence. The moment the lips of Adam and Eve touched that forbidden tree, and even before they swallowed what they chewed, time stopped for a moment in the gardens of bliss. It was not just a bite of a fruit. It was the breaking of a great divine covenant. In that fleeting moment, everything changed, and there began Chapter 11, The Great Fall from Paradise. The illusion of eternity turned into the reality of brokenness. The luminous veils that covered their bodies fell away, so their private parts became apparent to them, and they realized the enormity of what they had done. Right there, at that moment, the decisive divine command was issued, ending the first chapter of blissful existence. Go down, all of you, as enemies to one another, and you will have upon the earth a place of settlement and provision for a time. Thus, Adam and Eve descended to the abode of trial, and Iblis descended with them, to begin the eternal conflict upon the surface of this purified earth, a war that does not end until the rising of the hour. The kingdom that Iblis had planted in their minds vanished, and the fog of deception cleared to reveal the naked, harsh truth. The corners of paradise shook, the scent of the air changed, and the glow of absolute tranquility that enveloped their hearts faded, replaced by a terrifying, heavy feeling they had never known before: fear, regret, and deep brokenness. The consequences were immediate and brooked no delay. In the blink of an eye, the robes of light and dignity that covered them and adorned their pure bodies fell away. The garments of paradise, which befitted the station of obedience, vanished, and they found themselves in complete nakedness, their private parts exposed to them for the first time. It was a frightening sight that struck the depths of their pristine nature, for nakedness was not merely a physical exposure, but an exposure of the soul's weakness and its fall into the trap of disobedience. A state of panic and turmoil crept into their limbs, and they rushed through the trees of paradise, plucking large fig leaves and fastening them over their trembling bodies in a desperate attempt to cover what had been exposed of their private parts. While tears of regret poured from their eyes like a sweeping torrent. In the midst of this collapse, the weeping was cut short by a majestic and awe-inspiring call, a call from the truth, glorified and exalted be He, that shook the realms of existence. Did I not forbid you from that tree and tell you that Satan is to you a clear enemy? The divine reproach fell upon the hearts of Adam and Eve like fixed mountains. They found nothing to justify their action. Nor did they argue as Iblis had done before. Instead, they immediately confessed to the sin and sought the mercy of the Creator. Our Lord, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not forgive us and have mercy upon us, we will surely be among the losers. But divine justice required that every action have consequences, and that paradise, the abode of absolute purity, does not accept in its courtyard whoever is tainted by disobedience. Here, the cosmic, decisive order was issued, announcing the beginning of a new phase in the history of the universe. Go down, all of you, as enemies to one another, and you will have upon the earth a place of settlement and provision for a time. The descent was not merely a spatial transition from a higher to a lower place. It was a descent from the station of honoring and absolute rest to the abode of trial and hardship. The gates of heaven opened to lower intersecting paths toward planet Earth. Adam and Eve descended with broken, repentant hearts, carrying the weight of the sin and the hope for forgiveness, prepared to face a harsh life requiring toil and sweat to wrest a livelihood. At the exact same moment, Iblis descended to the same earth, but not as a penitent, rather as a menacer, carrying within his core an unquenchable fire and a mad desire for total destruction. The forgotten earth gathered the executioner and the victim, the seducer and the penitent. The earth, which Iblis had once cleansed from the corruption of the Hinn and the Binn, turned into an arena of direct and open conflict. There were no longer any veils or walls preventing confrontations. Adam possessed the words of repentance and the mission of reconstruction, while Iblis possessed the promise of respite and the mission of corruption. All descended to begin humanity's journey upon the dust of the planet, a journey written to be a series of crushing battles between the light of innate nature and the darkness of whispering, announcing the launch of the grand, eternal war whose chapters will not end until the blowing of the trumpet. Chapter 12. Building the throne of Iblis over the seas. Iblis descended to the desolate earth, but he did not descend as a fugitive looking for a hole to hide in and weep over his lost glory. Instead, he descended with the mindset of a deposed king seeking to establish an alternative empire, an empire built upon the ruins of light and nourished by the darkness of sins. He realized perfectly well that his battle with the progeny of Adam was not a battle of a day or a generation, but an extended war across eras and times. To manage this crushing cosmic war, he absolutely needed a command center and a fortified capital from which his sparks would launch to cover the corners of the earth. The accursed roamed the sides of the earth, and his choice fell upon the depths of the seas and deep oceans. There, amidst the clashing waves, Iblis established his grand court and his watery throne. In a morbid attempt to mimic majesty and to make his kingdom a center from which the ships of seduction would sail. From atop this throne, Iblis realized that misguiding billions of humans could not be done haphazardly. He began establishing a highly precise and complex organizational structure. At the head of this structure, he placed the leaders of his armies, who are his 5 sons, to whom he entrusted the major sectors of corruption on earth. Thabur, the prince of calamities and sorrows. His mission is to be present at times of loss and death to plant resentment in hearts, driving humans to tear their clothes, slap their cheeks, and object to the decrees of heaven. War, the commander of the brigades of vice and desires. He stays up to stir instincts, facilitate the paths of adultery and immorality, and beautify sin in the eyes of onlookers. Zalambor, the devil of marketplaces and trade. He stands in every market to plant greed, beautify cheating, and bring false oaths and untruthful swearing upon tongues. Mabsit, the prince of lies. He moves between tongues and gatherings to spread rumors, turning a small lie into a discord, fitna, that burns entire cities. Dasim, the most dangerous one, the devil of closed homes, tasked with infiltrating the most sacred of human fortresses, the family. Dasim enters with a man into his house if he forgets to mention the name of Allah, folds his bed, eats of his food, and then begins to ignite the spark of misery and anger between the spouses for the most trivial reasons. Because Iblis knows that the collapse of the family is the collapse of society, he made the highest medals of his kingdom awarded to the soldiers of Dasim. Every evening, Iblis gathers with his soldiers to ask them what they have done. He pays no heed to whoever caused a human to steal or drink wine, until a devil comes to him and says, "I did not leave him until I separated him from his wife." Iblis then draws him close to his throne, embraces him warmly, and says, "Yes, you," crowning him with the title of the best soldier. To guarantee the success of his sons and soldiers, Iblis equipped them with an arsenal of lethal psychological weapons and specified secret gateways for them to penetrate hearts. After learning that man is a fortress that falls only from within. Anger, the first gateway that blinds the mind and opens the path of bloodshed. Desire, the second gateway that deafens the ears to the call of innate nature. Envy, the third gateway that burns the spirit and makes man hate the Creator's blessings upon his creation, just as Iblis envied Adam before. Through these gateways, classified weapons are deployed. The attack begins with whispering, a mere faint idea that is not seen. Then comes the role of beautification, where the ugly disobedience is wrapped in a cover of pleasure and freedom to become palatable. If the human thinks of repentance, he is struck by the weapon of procrastination, saying to himself, "Tomorrow I will repent," so his life is stolen in moments of waiting. At times of obedience, the weapon of skeptification is used to corrupt the believer's intention and certainty. As for when a human drowns in sins and wants to return, here Iblis launches his greatest and most dangerous weapon, despair. He deludes the sinner into believing that his sins are greater than the mercy of Allah and that the gates of heaven have been closed in his face forever, causing him to surrender completely to the darkness. But the demonic plot did not settle for external attacks. Iblis invented an unparalleled system of surveillance and infiltration, the system of the Qareen, the constant companion. The accursed issued a decree that no newborn is born from the children of Adam except that a devil assigned to him is born with him, accompanying him like his shadow from his first cry until the extraction of his soul. This Qareen is not just an ordinary soldier. He is a spy who flows through the human like the flowing of blood, memorizing his traits, studying his points of weakness, and knowing when he gets angry and when he weakens. He distances himself and shrinks if the human remembers his Lord, and attacks fiercely if he becomes heedless. It is the enemy that dwells within, sleeping in the veins and waiting for the right moment to strike his fatal blow. With this terrifying organizational structure, destructive psychological weapons, and the spies accompanying every human soul, the kingdom of darkness settled above the waves. The earth turned into a bloody chessboard, and Iblis's naval throne became a non-stop factory for managing the battle, relying on a tight plan targeting the hunting of every human through their specific loopholes, believing that every step the children of Adam take toward the abyss is a personal victory by which he avenges his wounded pride. Chapter 13: The Conflict of the Prophets and Messengers. While the wheel of time was turning and generations succeeded one another upon the back of the planet, Iblis was watching from his watery throne the fruits of his malicious plan as they ripened. He had succeeded in spreading blind idolatry, ignited the fires of wars, and beautified for humans the shedding of blood, the burying of infant girls alive, and the usurping of rights. The accursed thought that the earth had submitted to him entirely, and that humanity had drowned in the swamp of seduction with no return. But heaven, whose mercy encompasses all things, did not leave the progeny of Adam an easy prey in the claws of the devil. Every time the darkness intensified and closed in on chests, torches of divine light would spark on the horizon, announcing the mission of a prophet or a messenger to awaken the sleeping innate nature and correct the compass back toward heaven. The appearance of the prophets represented to Iblis the greatest existential threat to his kingdom. These men were not ordinary humans. They were impenetrable fortresses of certainty, chosen by the Creator and equipped with revelation and infallibility. Iblis realized that his whispers and insinuations, which brought down commoners in seconds, shattered and vanished at the thresholds of the hearts of these chosen ones. Therefore, the accursed changed his war tactics. He did not target the prophets with direct seduction, knowing his inevitable failure, but instead directed all the energy of his demonic kingdom to isolate them, distort their message, and incite their peoples against them through all methods of cunning and deception. With Prophet Noah, Iblis recruited his psychological armies to plant mockery and pride in the hearts of his people. For nearly 1,000 years, Iblis stood behind every mockery directed at Noah, whispering into the ears of the nobles to accuse him of madness and instigating the commoners to put their fingers in their ears and cover themselves with their garments. Despite all this long psychological siege, Noah stood like a lofty mountain, unbroken by the length of the affliction or the fewness of followers, until the flood came to wash the earth from the filth of the devil's followers, leaving Iblis to taste the bitterness of a harsh defeat before the patience of a human made of clay. With Abraham, the intimate friend of the most merciful, Iblis saw in Abraham a purity that burned his plans, so he mobilized against him the armies of tyranny, headed by Nimrod. The pinnacle of the confrontation manifested when Iblis inspired his followers to ignite the fiercest fire known to humanity to burn Abraham. Iblis stood far away, seeing in that burning fire an extension of his fiery nature of which he was proud, thinking it would eliminate this human light. But the divine word descended like lightning. "O fire, be coolness and safety upon Abraham." At that moment, Iblis saw his fire, the source of his pride and arrogance, humbled and submitting to the Creator's order to guard Abraham's clay body in a cosmic slap that humiliated the devil's pride. With Moses, peace be upon him, Moses came to confront Iblis's greatest masterpiece, Pharaoh. Iblis had blown into Pharaoh from the spirit of his own pride until he made him utter Iblis's first word, "I am your most exalted Lord." Iblis managed a fierce war relying on magic and intimidation, but Moses' staff swallowed all the illusions of the sorcerers, and the devil's plot collapsed once again. Even when Iblis tried to loop from behind, exploiting Moses' absence to seduce the children of Israel into worshiping the golden calf, the message of monotheism returned to annihilate the golden idols and break the trial of the Samari. With Jesus, son of Mary, the messages continued, and Jesus came with the spirituality that exposed demonic materialism. Iblis tried to besiege him through the betrayal of followers and the cunning of priests, but heaven raised him and purified him from their plot. With Prophet Muhammad, the decisive battle came with a final message. Iblis mobilized everything left in his bag of cunning. He incited tribes, gathered factions, planted hypocrites within the ranks of the believers, and exerted every effort to extinguish the light of the final message. But the Quran kept descending like a flame of fire, burning his whispers and firming the hearts of the believers. In every round of this extended historical conflict, Iblis stood in the end dumbfounded and helpless. Despite what he possessed of hidden power, armies of Jinn, a long life, and experience accumulated over thousands of years, he found himself failing miserably in breaking the will of the prophets and messengers. These chosen men proved that when clay is mixed with the light of revelation and the truth of certainty, it becomes harder than any fiery power, and that hearts connected to heaven are not penetrated by the arrows of hell. Iblis's plans shattered upon the rock of the divine exception he had heard on the day of his expulsion, except, among them, your chosen servants. Making the accursed realize that his war, no matter how much its scope widened, was doomed to fail before the caravans of light that never ceased from the earth. To hear, the pages of this epic are folded. Conclusion: the continuous battle. The terrifying epic has ended on the lines, but the real battle on the ground of reality has not ended yet. Rather, it is continuous in every inhalation and exhalation. We have dived together into the deepest and darkest points of history. We saw how the worshipper fell from the seventh heaven to the bottom of the curse, and how he established an entire empire with no goal except bringing you down right now. You know your enemy, you know the names of his leaders, and you realize very well how his psychological weapons and his secret gateways work. Targeting your heart. Remember always that your Quran is present with you, watching you and waiting for the first moment of heedlessness, a fit of anger, or a look of envy to resume the attack. Knowledge is your first weapon, and certainty is your impenetrable shield. So do not allow the weapons of procrastination, skepticism, or despair to find a path to your mind after today. Thank you for watching Dodi Drama Channel. I hope you like the story. Join our big family now. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and enjoy this enchanting world.